I don't know. Right. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, and I'm calling to order this regular school board meeting of the Anchorage School District. My name is Elisa Vikalis. In the boardroom with me, I have board members Marcette and board members Hildy. Online with this, I have board member Holloman, board member Donley, board member Mitchell, and board member Bellamy. Dr. Bishop is with us tonight, as well as several members of her team, and we have an agenda up ahead of us. We are going to start with our flag salute, and member Marcette, if you could. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude the Dena'ina people, both past and present, who have lived on these lands since long before Anchorage was here. May we all be good stewards of these lands. Shannon. We want to welcome you to our meeting and thank you for attending and supporting the work of the Anchorage School District and this board. The mission of the Anchorage School District is educating all students for success in life. The board thanks students, parents, teachers, staff, school business partners, and the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talent, and your tax dollars. Next up is the approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
First, is there a second?
Second.
All right, I have a first and a second. Are there any amendments to the agenda? If there are no objections.
Madam, the second was Margot Bellamy, I believe, for the record.
Yeah, we had two of them, but that's good. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Are there any objections to the agenda as laid out? The agenda is passed. Next up is community engagement. First up is board conference and committee reports. We will start with, since it's nice and fresh in our minds, we have Finance Committee and Chair Marcette.
Oh, there we go. Yes, so we had our Finance Committee meeting. We reviewed, talked about the budget and the timeline and how we proceed with that. We also talked about some pre-filed legislation and how that would possibly impact the school district. We'll have more meetings on that to discuss and talk a little bit about ESSER 2 funds and what that possibly might look like for the school district, and we'll have a better idea when the budget's released.
Thank you.
And our next meeting will be, I think it's going to be the first, or do we say the third week? Yeah, but we're going to change that. Right, but we're going to change that because that's, oh, okay, that's what I mean, March.
February 16th.
Yeah, oh, February 6th. Oh, that's right, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know where I'm at.
And next up will be communications and Chair Bellamy.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We have not met since our last meeting. However, unless I'm spacing out the time, I think our next meeting will be February 9th. Just a quick recap. We did we actually did our legislative event where our priorities were presented to our legislators. And that information can be found on our website. And I want to thank Kathy Moffett and Alan Brown and their as part of the team to make that a reality. And so so that was our primary event since our last meeting. Our next meeting will be February 9th, following the governance committee meeting, which will take place at 3:30, followed by communications at 4:30. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up will be
Madam President.
Governance Chair, Chair Hilding.
Thank you. So just to kick off, there was a question in our last governance committee. We met on the 12th on whether you're voting in a committee. And so there was a follow-up with parliamentarian Ann McFarland that yes, in fact, you do vote in a committee. It's not a straw poll. So if anybody has questions, I'm happy to share her feedback. We went through several policies. One is on the boundary change. This is something that's very relevant to everyone in our community, but particularly maybe realtors want to be aware of it. This is where beginning in, we would start a 10-year cycle for boundary reviews for the whole district and then as needed in between. So that was voted to come to the full board. So we should see that as a non-action item on our next board meeting and then a vote at the following meeting, so a month from now. We also went over our anti-racism policy, and that's still in draft form. So if there's any community members who want to provide feedback, you could look at it on our board docs under the governance committee meeting. It's tagged under there, and you can see the current draft of it. We'll go over it again at our next governance committee meeting, and then we would expect it to come to the full board for consideration. We had a review of discipline policies. Member Marcette was going over there and just talking about ways to reduce school suspensions and keep students in schools. And so if you have any recommendations, you could send those to Member Marcette, who's kind of looking at that a little bit. We talked about our non-custodial parent policy, and that's going to be coming to the full board to review, just a small word change on that one. And then we went through our 6,000 series so that we have a typo correction coming and looking into homework at elementary 6154, just looking into it. We haven't made any move toward that at all. Our next meeting will be on February 9th at 3:30 p.m. here, or you could, I'm sure, Zoom in as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam
I
President.
want to just take a moment to acknowledge very excitedly that we have our student rep with us, Miss Emily Hickox. Welcome back. We're happy to have you here tonight. And if you wanted to just take a minute to say hi, and if there's any updates from the Student Advisory Board, we'd love to just hear what's been going on with you and your world.
Yeah, hi. I'm super excited to be back. And I'm really excited to be here back to share with you guys. Student Advisory Board this year has 2 new advisors, Miss Lewis from Eagle River and Mr. Wheelis from Diamond. And so I've been working with them a lot, and we've been trying to revamp Student Advisory Board and sort of give it a new purpose and a bunch of new goals. And so we're really excited. We have our first meeting with students on Thursday. And so we're just really excited to see the new direction the Student Advisory Board is going in. So hopefully at this next meeting, we'll have more news to share.
Thanks, Emily. Glad to see you back.
Madam President.
Yes, Member Donnelly.
Thank you. I was seeking, we don't have the raise hand function apparently tonight on Zoom, but I was seeking recognition under the committee reports.
I do know where you're going with this, and we're going to tackle this one under new business, which is a little bit down towards the bottom of the agenda. But I would like to make sure you do have your raise hand function. It should be on the bottom. It's not on the bottom right, but it's on the bottom center in the toolbar.
Yeah, I don't see it tonight.
Maybe we can have somebody reach out to you here. Okay. We may have somebody give you a quick call and see if we can sort through that to make sure that's there for you. But I do have a placeholder under new business for your resolution that you wanted to talk about. Next up on the agenda is community outreach. If there were any board members that wanted to share anything that they're hearing in the community or anything from community councils that might be of interest to the board as a whole. And I see Member Bellamy.
Yes, I have a couple of recognition, mostly of our students who have been engaged in community activities relative to Dr. Martin Luther King Day of Service. I am just so inspired by these students, not to mention their families. And I don't have a full list, but Durante Ware, Noah Kemp, Samuel Richard, Mark Richard, Aaron Richard, Stanley Wright Jr., Orion Kemp, Zelda Zolotel, Madison Hill, Drummond Williams, Jasser Simpson, Talisa Ware, and Caleb Reed. And for those students who I'm missing, I apologize, but they collected over 4,100 pounds of food as a day of service activity. And I am just so inspired by their efforts. And I'd also like to recognize 5 students that participated yesterday in the MLK celebration of diversity and also National Day of Service. I do not have their last name, but they are connected with Storyworks, and they are Isaiah, Stephanie, Premier, Mateo, and Fatima. You know who you are. You guys were awesome, and you also inspired me yesterday. And then my final comment goes to our own district for having a very wonderful recognition page for Dr. King's birthday and for his day of service. I thought that was I got lots of comments from the community, and it was very well done. I did say final, but one more thing. Today, I participated on a panel that was sponsored by the Alaska Children's Trust and the Alaska Black Caucus, and that was the National Day of Racial Healing. And the conversations were very positive, very uplifting, and that actually was well attended. So I thank those organizations for filling that void in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Member Hildy.
Thanks. I just wanted to pass on some thanks from community councils, excellent reception from our nurses and COVID vaccine administration. Just, we've gotten lots of positive emails, but just in the community, people just blown away at how well run it is, how welcome and positive, and how efficient it was. So it's just really fun to hear and certainly pass along.
Awesome. Member Marcette.
I just want to echo that on the vaccinations. I think Dr. Bishop, you told me we gave over 6,000 vaccinations, about 1,000 a day. Yeah, that is certainly impressive, and it couldn't have been done without leadership and all the volunteers that participated. I will tell you that I didn't even feel like I got it. That was probably the easiest shot I've gotten in my whole life. So I know that everybody was very thankful that we were able to open that up. So kudos to our nursing staff, our volunteers, and to our leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on in the agenda. Goal monitoring. We're going to talk about grades for elementary, and at this time, I'll kick it over to Dr. Bishop.
All right, thank you, Madam President. And I wanted to share again that as we do goal monitoring this year, it is kind of not going by the model, because our goals, and this is for our community to understand, that our outcome monitoring are really going to be showing evidence of our progress to our goals. And the board recently, in December, approved the goals. We are shoring up the interim goals and going to present by the end of this month an outcome monitoring calendar for those goals. However, this year we're just practicing just sharing data where we are during this pandemic year. Prior to, let's see, I believe it was in December, or was it just the last meeting? I shared the grades, if you will, for secondary. And there was a question at that time wondering how elementary is doing. And we have the data here, but I wanted to share this with a little caveat that it is very difficult, if you will, to understand where kids are utilizing grades at the elementary level. A lot of times we do like to know, we look at progress by their grades, but understanding what they know and can do is a little bit easier. So those assessments and those standards and understanding, can they do this, can't they do this, sometimes provides more data. So with that, just keep that in mind. And as I move forward, the grade distribution is by a mark. And so it is not necessarily by every child, because the children and how they were in class receiving grades really depended on which courses they were in. So some students, some schools provided a manner due to their staffing availability to do science and social studies at the same time while they're still doing their reading and math. Others had science in one semester, they're going to do social studies in another. So traditionally, our schools were very standardized in the grades that they give. But during this time, students may not have received a mark for everything that they participated in. Certainly reading and math, but not all. And so I'm going to start with these data. If you take a look at 19 and 20, which was last school year, with the present school year, and again, these are fall of last year to fall of this year, this school year, there's quite a difference in the number of marks. So the total number of marks, grades given, not individually, one student could have received 3 of these, one student could have received 5 of them. Okay. So we had almost 97,000, which would make up 100% of the data set. This fall, it was about 57,000 made up the data set. If you take a look at elementary or lower, it's actually pre-K through second grade gives the O's, S's, and N's, whereas the traditional A, B, C, D, F is generally in 3rd through 6th grade. So that's how they're divided up. And if you take a look at even the O, S's, and N's, if you could think of things such as, penmanship and then a separate grade for spelling and a separate grade for participation. So we like to just give progress on those different items. But given the use of online learning and the Zoom time, the focus was really on the reading and math. So O, S's, and N's, there's about 70,000, less than half in the primary grades. So what you're seeing are last year's school year fall grades, this year's school year fall grades. And please note that A through F is generally the data set for 3rd through 6th. There wasn't too much of a change, except in the area where students weren't doing well, if you look at the D's and F's. So the blue line is the fall of last year, not last calendar year, but last school year. And then the recent fall that we just completed is in the orange. And in the average or C range in the middle, that grew. C's, D's, and F's did grow. They weren't necessarily statistically significant, except for if you take a look at the F, it did almost double in that category. In K2, the grade distribution over the same time looked a little different. Our O's increased, our outstanding grades increased in pre-K through 2nd grade, and our S's, or satisfactory, increased. The others, S plus, of course, decreased, and the N's, or needs improvement, also similar like you saw in the F category, and the grade distribution did increase. Again, not necessarily that statistically significant, but if you look at the S plus, it really ranged into the more neutral or needing improvement range. We always take a look then a little bit deeper about where are the marks going in which student groups. So we look at ethnicity and then different student groups. So we have our reporting. We keep this in line with the federal government's mandating our mandatory reporting categories. So we have Alaska Native American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, multi-ethnic, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and then white. And so these are the terms used when we report to the federal government in regard to our education data. So if you're wondering, like, where are the marks for those different groups, I'm going to show you in a little bit the actual graph so you can see a picture. But again, the top is last school year's fall, and the bottom is this school year's fall. And again, the difference you can see is in the number of marks. Very fewer marks this fall. But we like to look at it. These are called a stacked graph. And what it does is really picture-wise, it gives you an idea of some changes and some movements, because sometimes just looking at a chart or a data set doesn't do it for you. Where we noticed a major change, which is very different, causing more differences than would be expected is when we look at where are the marks in a certain of the whole, you want to know, is that total carried out throughout the data set? And if you look at the top, the gray, and then the bottom, those are the outliers that the data doesn't follow. And again, there isn't individual information that we can glean from this. We are just looking at trends. And so the top is our white students who received some of those marks. So 35% of all the marks went to white students, and 9% went to Alaska Native students. But then if you look at the actual marks that they received, you see that the distribution changes. It doubles in the D's and F's, or the F's, and then if you add the D's, so the D's and F's has tripled the total number of marks by just Alaska Natives. And so we want to take a look at this and we ask ourselves, why is this? Now in our data look, we would drill down to schools, drill down to classrooms, drill down to what we're doing. For this data capture, it's really limited by just the limits of how the school year has been set up. In addition, grades at elementary school are sometimes looked at, especially in the primary grades. You want to base them on standards, if you will, and the composition for these grades has changed, and just the differences in the marks lets us know that. So it is lacking some standardization. But again, when you look at ethnicity, here's just a different way to share that same information. Out of all the students this year in grades 3 through 6 who received a mark, about 57,000 of them up at the top, this shows again within that student group where the distribution is for A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. And once again, you're just looking at trends and differences, and what pops out, of course, is what I shared in that other stacked graph, is the Alaska Native American Indian and the white populations don't follow the same trend as the others. Grades K through 2 have a different trend as well. If you look, generally, there's the fewest F's, and then it increases to A's in most of these groups. But if you notice in our elementary grades, we've really moved to the mean. There's a lot of just middle grades given with S's. And I believe a lot of that, if I had to suspect, is due to just the ability to get a true read from a Zoom classroom. Our teachers, when they assess, are really making decisions about every 3 minutes in a classroom. Our teachers have checklists, they're paying attention to what kids know, and it's not necessarily a test as we would think of a test in our later years, like kids sitting down to do some type of assessment. A lot of times you're just looking at children's participation, you're asking them to respond. If they respond correctly, teachers are keeping track of this, and it's just difficult on a Zoom. And our high school students also, when we had their grades, when we really asked what were some of the setbacks in this, when we had iReady and some other assessments, is we really don't know what students are doing themselves, which students have support. So getting students back to face-to-face is really important for us to understand what do they know and what can they do, because again, we want to prepare them for the next grade level. But we had a lot of regression to the mean, just really that middle area is where we said, and I don't believe it's a matter that we just probably knew that they were participating, but we're not sure that they really have an account of that skill. So by interest groups, these are other support type groups that we have in the district. And so here's another way to look at these. Now, students could belong to multiple student groups. In the ethnicity, they're generally one ethnicity unless they pick multi-ethnic. But in the student groups, they could really be in every single one of these student groups. So our student groups are economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and English language learners. And it just shares the number of marks, again, not students, but the number of marks in those categories, and then the distribution of those marks. Again, one student can actually be in all of these. And again, here is the elementary fall grade distribution for economically disadvantaged students with disabilities and English language learners, and how our kids did. They're very comparable to each other. And the N is where it says number of marks. So economically disadvantaged is by far our largest group of interest in ASD. And consequently, that shows a lot of the disproportionality with students of poverty that occurs in ASD. Hence, the board made quite a bit of goals about student groups and equity of outcomes. And so in any other given year, these data would not really be highly valuable, because the reason you want to use data is to make actionable change, to understand how different do I teach, what can I do to adjust the instruction, how can we think about, is it the time, the intensity, where is the learning happening, and what can we do? This data set is difficult. It's the best that we can do. Teachers, in recording student learning are doing their best, but again, it is a two-dimensional assessment. And not all the time do we understand what students can actually know and be able to do.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Do any board members? Yes, we do. First up, Member Marset.
So thank you for that. I think it would be very difficult to grade individuals in the type of environment that we're in currently. And I know that our teachers are doing the best they can. But one of the things I'm curious about a little different is, have we been tracking possibly the behaviors of what we're seeing on Zoom and what we might encounter when kids come back?
Certainly teachers do see the behaviors and have supports, and many of our classes, our aides and additional teachers are joining teachers in the Zooms just to really focus on students that might need to be redirected. We've also dealt with some discipline while on Zoom, behaviors, and generally those are just outcries from students. Some are, against school rules, so they're disruptions in the Zoom itself. But they, as a district level, unless it's entered in something more serious, it's really handled at the school level. Mm-hmm. And really just in reading the research lately, the lack of support due to the pandemic in the mental health or well-being area, that's been lacking because of the pandemic. And that's just not in schools, but ubiquitously mm-hmm. in our, whether it's at the family level, and then children are in a family where some unrest might happen, that they're experiencing it, that the prediction is that schools will be behind a little bit in addressing this. And again, we know that the cognition of students, we have really, really smart students, but unless we take care of that well-being mm-hmm. as well in them, sometimes they don't get their best learning out. So we want to be sure to address that. But district-wide, outside of reports for support and things like that, we don't have data in like a data dashboard or anything.
Thank you.
Next up in the queue is Board Member Bellamy.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Bishop, for really drilling down more into the data, because I think there's just so many opportunities there. My question really is, of the data that we collected last fall, how much of the end and the F grades indicate just attendance, where kids just didn't show up? That's one question. The other has to do with, really, what does an F mean in terms of, when would I know teachers did make the determination, but I'm just trying to figure out where is the opportunity for us to define what an F would mean across the board?
So we have opportunity. I don't believe that in grading, because we tried to work. I mean, I think Dr. Stock said it once, as different as teachers are, the grading is held so personal to them. If you recall last spring, we wanted to standardize the grading, spent a lot of months discussing this, and we got close, but not to a certain that this is how everything is going to be. That's really the importance of assessments. And so I do know that college preparedness, if you will, that grading really means a lot to college preparedness, and in comparison to SATs and ACTs. Simply put, students' effort and completion and trying and redoing in grades is really about if you're going to work hard. And a lot of college success is the stick-with-itness, I'm going to work hard. So interesting enough, colleges are okay. They're bypassing SATs, things like that, and looking at grades. At the elementary level, the theory is really flip side of that, because we really want to look at the standards and the standard marks, like, can kids do this? Are kids able to do something? And we use really checklists and assessments all the time to do that. In fact, there has been some movement, the MAP test, MAP growth test from Northwest. There's a lot of districts in the elementary grades that is what they send home for the grade reports to their parents, because it is truly about what kids know and are able to do, not a grade about did they do their homework or not. So they're really standards based, or is it, your marks based? So there's a lot of growth to do in that area. I would say that that's one of the most difficult things in education to come up with, that we all are literally standardized in one way. But I would say that our schools and principals and their teams of teachers utilize the data well. They have quarterly data meetings. They want to understand students at the student level. As I said before, is it more time needed for students to learn? Is it the intensity? Is it a different structure? Do they need a different manner to receive it? So at the elementary level, I would say our elementary schools with their supervisors have begun to really dig deep into not just a grade, but the student learning. Do students understand? And so at this point, I don't have an easy answer about what we can glean from that, but I certainly will share as we move forward and move into the monitoring and understanding grades more, that we'll know. The F's in regard to attendance, I don't have that data in front of me. But again, because attendance at the elementary level was very fluid. Mm-hmm. If a child and his or her parent couldn't attend, or because a parent was working, couldn't attend the live Zoom, if they logged in later on and looked at the recording and then did the work, that was counted as being present. So there's a lot of unstandardization, if you will, to that, and a lot of flexibility. But those are great questions, and I think they're going to remain with us. I don't think, as long as I've been in education, they've been asked over and over again, and still to know one agreement about what truly does a grade mean. Yeah.
I appreciate that, because I really do think, while I'm, I'm dismayed with the Fs, I understand them. And I also know that they don't necessarily represent what kids know and what they're able to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up in the queue is Board Member Hildy.
Thank you. Well, I had the fun of getting to grade K into this winter with the help of an ASD teacher. My kids were in for a quarter of homeschool, so we got to go through these. I'm a little concerned maybe on the number of O's, even fall of last year and this year, when we talk about rigor, and even seeing that reflected in, I don't put it, I don't say all the weights on test scores, but that's a metric we use. And I would never say 10% O's and 10% F's. We would never want to get into that kind of stuff. But is that a discussion that comes out in data review when we're saying, are we really holding kids to the high level of rigor if we're seeing a lot of O's, or conversely, a lot of F's, if maybe, reflecting, I guess, is there a reflection on the level of rigor as shown in the grading?
That's a great question. And in fact, Dr. Stock and I discussed that today. And we have to ask ourselves that, and truly it came before this board in regard to our reading instruction. When we had such pushback on our new reading program that it was too hard, it was inappropriate for children, we had a discussion that over the time that ASD had their prior reading to when we adopted a new, the standards moved about 18 months, I believe, Mark, in his look. So what we had originally in our standards, what we were teaching to years ago, the rigor did change with the standards. And ASD was a little, just collectively as a whole, I'm saying in the aggregate, we were slow to make those adjustments so that when we had and adopted a reading program, it was looked at as too hard. This is too hard. This is not developmentally appropriate. Yet it was to standards. So in that vein, Mark and I, Dr. Stock and I were discussing today that we really need those assessments to know. We know 60% of the students in ASD as an aggregate are below their peers in reading across the nation. We know that through statewide assessments that are aligned nationally as well as through the NAEP. We know that. But yet grades reflect we're getting outstanding. So that begs the question. It does talk to you about what goes into, and it goes back to, remember Bellamy's point, what goes into a grade? What is that? That's why, for me, looks that we can look across the board and say, where are our kids and what next do they need to learn to make it to the next level? Really reviewing the standards that go into that grade is what's needed. And consequently right now, I did place some information in the Board Connect. It's very difficult. It's been difficult to change over everything we do for teachers as well as keep up with the needs of students while on Zoom. That's very hard for educators, as well as being able to monitor that, being able to find the time to meet together to say, my student did this and my student, and watch each other teach. All those tools that teachers use to grow together have been really stalled or halted a little bit by this. So to your question, we do know by our state reports, our state tests as well as NAEP are very similar. So we might not like either one of them, but they actually tell the same story. And so our grades tell a different story. So then we have to ask ourselves, how do our kids do and what do we want them to do and what advantages, what do we promise them when they graduate from us? So that story is going to continue. We're not there yet, but I would say our reading goals and our math goals and the career and college and life ready goals that the board has set will have we educators looking at that. And again, we're going to look in the mirror about what can we do to affect that to have success for all students.
Thank you. Did any other board members have any further questions for Dr. Bishop?
And I did have a question that there are more, I believe the correction, more 4th, 5th, and 6th graders have A's, B's, and C's and F's. 3rd grade isn't all 3rd grade. So it's a little bit different. And then there's some younger kids that also go up. So it's not exact to every grade level, but we'll update in the data.
Thank you. All right, moving up in the agenda is public testimony. I'm going to read a statement. The board welcomes public comment on non-agenda and non-action items. We value public comment as it ensures that we remain aware of public thoughts, ideas, and concerns, and informs our decision-making process. The school board encourages anyone wishing to provide public testimony to sign up in advance for in-person or telephonic testimony or to email written comments by 2 p.m. the day of the meeting. These comments will become part of the meeting record. There is a 1-hour time slot at the beginning of the meeting. Testimony excess of 1 hour will be heard at the end of the meeting or may be submitted in writing. If you have signed up in advance for in-person or telephonic testimony, you will be called on in the order in which you were signed up. You will have 3 minutes to testify. When 30 seconds remain, a chime will ring to inform you so that you can finish your sentence. Additionally, it is not our practice that board members answer questions or engage in discussion with members of the public. This is your time to speak and our time to listen. The board will consider all information shared by the public, and when deemed necessary, issues raised in testimony will be referred to the administration for follow-up. I believe on today's list, we have about 14 speakers. The first one in person, Dave Carter. And Thank you for joining us tonight. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for hearing me here. I am a 36-year resident of Anchorage, and I am a retired attorney, and I am here on behalf of all of those parents and teachers and staff and community members who were shocked and stunned by what happened at our Capitol building last January 6th. Obviously, that was not normal. It was so far from normal that many of us, of course, would never have expected that this would occur. Part of the problem that we're dealing with is social media. When most of us went to school, it didn't exist. There were bullies to contend with, but you dealt with those in other ways. This is the new bullying, and it's all it's in hiding in many respects. We need to deal with social media issues. We need to have students, teachers, parents, and staff educated and have resources available to them to understand how social media works. My phone number for those at home or KTUU and others is 349-4980. Again, it's 349-4980. And you can certainly follow up with me. There's a voicemail at my home. I don't always answer calls from strangers, but I'll return your call if you indicate that you're calling about these issues. I have lots of suggestions to help the school district and help Anchorage and help the rest of us understand, why a number of people still believe that Joe Biden wasn't fairly elected and Mr. Trump apparently was. It's a real thing apparently, and many of us, I think most of us, are shocked. This is all happening on our watch. Some of us are older than others, but everyone here, I think, understands what's going on and cares. And I have sent an email out to the school board. The first one was to Alicia on December 18th of 20 about social media before the mob that stormed the Capitol building. And I'm happy to share that with people too. And then I followed up with one to Dr. Bishop and Alicia about Dr. Bishop's message, which is not sufficient to adequately inform people about what happened. There were people that showed up. This was pre-planning with flex cuffs. It wasn't just protests. Thanks very much. 349-4980. I'll be following up with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the telephone, Danielle Kemp. Daniel, are you on the line tonight?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We sure can. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you to the board for having me tonight. My name is Danielle Kemp. I am a retired Army combat officer, teacher here in the ASD. I'm a co-chair of the Alaska Black Caucus Education Committee and co-chair of the Human and Civil Rights Committee for the AEA. Tonight, I want to talk about the ASD's new anti-racism and instructional equity policy and how I am in full support of that policy. It's very important that this policy gets off to a great start. It will provide the general framework and guidance that will inform our eventual anti-racism procedures for the district. Just want folks to be aware that, this is not about some sort of indoctrination of, kids or convincing them how to think, but it's really just giving those folks, kids, free and comfortable spaces really to have those conversations about things that are important to them. The question really not at hand about whether the ASD needs an anti-racism policy, but really what that policy will look like. All right. This is not debatable, especially with people of color who have reported incidences of racism and or discrimination within the ASD. And just to be clear, racism takes several forms and really works kind of hand in hand with one another to reinforce those ideas, behaviors, and policies. That includes individual racism, interpersonal racism, and institutional racism, as well as structural racism. One example of institutional racism in the ASB is in the attendance rate versus graduation rate and dropout rate. All of the non-white subgroups that we know of have a more than 4% gap between their respective attendance rate and graduation rate. With Alaska Natives, the gap is the largest at 27.4% is the gap. The collective dropout rate for our students of color are 3 times the rate of their white counterparts. All right, 30 seconds. And so, I just want to really express to this board tonight that we must put forward this anti-racism policy. People of color and our allies are speaking to you and saying that the ASD needs this. Are you listening? I hope so. You must. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, speaker number 3 on the telephone, Celeste Hodge Groden. Celeste, are you on the line with us tonight?
I am. Hello.
We can hear you. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Celeste Hodge Groden, the president and CEO of the Alaska Black Caucus. As many of you know, our organization advocates for the rights of Black people and other people of color in the areas of health, education, economics, and justice. Yesterday, we celebrated the life of a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Not only was he the author of some amazing writings, such as the I Have a Dream speech, but a trailblazer and an advocate of civil rights, justice, and equity. Today, we recognize National Day of Racial Healing. For those that don't know, the National Day of Racial Healing is an opportunity for people, organizations, and communities across the United States to call for racial healing by bringing people together in their common humanity to take collective action in creating a more just and equitable world. The Alaska Black Caucus led in partnership with the Alaska Children's Trust a conversation where we shared racial healing is a process that restores individuals and communities to wholeness, repairs the damage caused by racism, and transforms societal structures into ones that affirm the inherent value of all people. So here we are today. How fitting is it to have before us the Anchorage School District's new anti-racism policy? For the record, the Alaska Black Caucus is in full support of this policy. First of all, I'm shocked there wasn't one in place, which might explain why racism and discrimination has been running rampant within the school district. However, while our country has made some progress in terms of civil rights, during Dr. King's time, we do know statistics tells us we have a long way to go as it relates to equity and equality of Black and brown kids within our schools. To ensure that the work of Dr. King and other civil rights leaders is preserved, America's schools, including the Anchorage School District, have an important role to play in leading the conversation on equality, equity, and tolerance. Dr. King himself understood the importance of education and advancing the conditions of people of color and in eliminating long-standing societal prejudices. To that end, again, the Alaska Black Caucus strongly recommends support of the Anchorage School District's new anti-racism policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up in the queue, speaker number 4, Reagan Brooks. Reagan, are you on the line tonight?
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for your service on the school board, and thank you to all the educators and school district staff who are here today and are working so hard to support students. My name is Reagan Brooks. I am a mother, a parent of 2 children in the Anchorage School District. I'm testifying today to express support for the Anchorage School District adoption of an anti-racism policy. The need for an anti-racism policy is simply not debatable. I wish there was no racism in our schools, but as many have shared in previous school board meetings tonight and elsewhere, and as the school district has illustrated with its own data, that's simply not true. There is racism in our schools. Please do the right thing and make a choice to look forward, support all students, and do all you can to make ASD a safe, healthy, just, and anti-racist space for all students. I'm going to pass the phone to my children now. Tonight, they both chosen to testify. This is just too important.
Hello. Thank you all. My name is Teo. I'm 11 years old and I am in the 5th grade at Chugach. I'm testifying today to ask you to listen to everyone who is asking you to support an anti-racism policy for our district. I think an anti-racism policy is important because who wants to be for racism? That would be very bad because it will make people feel more comfortable and safe in school. And why am I even saying this stuff? Because it is just so obvious.
Thank you all. My name is Nia. I am 13 years old and I am in the 8th grade at Romig Middle School. I am testifying today to ask you to support an anti-racism policy for our district. I think this policy is important because it will promote healthy learning environments for everyone and because racism is harmful, and why would anyone want to support racism in our schools? Thank you for listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, speaker number 5 in person. I have Megan Holton.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I just kind of got to hold it up a little close there.
Great.
And you have 3 minutes, and please go ahead.
Wonderful, thanks. So my name is Megan Holton, and I have a 4-year-old who will hopefully be an ASD student at some point. And then I also teach occasionally as an artist in the schools. And I also graduated from West High in 2000. And I believe that being able to identify racism and speak up against injustice are life skills. And I wish I had left West High with these skills, but I did not. And I'm really excited, and I strongly support the proposed anti-racist policy and forthcoming plan. I think a clear, actionable anti-racism plan is a key step to the system change we want to see. There should be a clear policy and procedures for dealing with racist behaviors by individuals, as well as protocols for reviewing learning tools, such as textbooks, that perpetuate systemic racism. When I was in middle and high school, I was tracked into advanced, I'm using air quotes here, classes that were filled with predominantly white kids. There should be an anti-racism framework to discuss the tracking that I experienced as institutional racism. I want to remind everyone that it's the experience of racism and not race itself that causes the poor outcomes that we are familiar with. An anti-racism policy will support the change we need so that all students are able to access and enjoy the education at ASD and benefit equally. I'd also like to remind board members that there's no such thing as racism against white people. There can be bias against white people, but racism is the coupling of actions plus the power of systems. The question at hand is not whether ASD needs an anti-racism policy, but rather what this policy should look like. It should address the 4 main components of racism, as Mr. Kemp laid out, and also as outlined in the proposed policy, so that it's easier for ASD community members and students to speak up and identify and discuss those problems when they see and feel it. We need to cultivate spaces where young people can speak and discuss their experiences without fear, and also with the knowledge that there will be an adult in a leadership position that can follow up with their concerns. This is not debatable, as too many people of color have reported incidences of racism and or discrimination at the ASD. And as a white person, I know that I perpetuated racism through my silence as a young person. Systemic change needs policy and plans, and this policy is a step in the right direction. And the school board must take its cues and guidance regarding the approval and implementation of this policy from communities of color. This is what systemic change looks like, and that will lead to the outcomes that we are all working towards. And I believe that the proposed annual equity report that is outlined in the proposed policy will help keep us accountable to that plan and those desired outcomes that we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the telephone, speaker number 6, Leon James. Leon, are you on the line with us tonight?
Yes. Hello, good evening. My name is Leon Hymas, and I live over in University Lake with my family. And thank you to the school board for allowing me to testify tonight. It's very encouraging to me to see the school board pursuing an anti-racism policy and the prospect of raising graduation rates, of lowering disciplinary rates, of lowering dropout rates, and of generally working to make Anchorage even more anti-racist is very exciting. I think that it's really sorely needed, especially with the events that have transpired since since January 6th. And right now I'm looking at a picture from Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C., and they have a sign up that says, "Sedition, when you're white, they let you do it." And I think that, I feel like every day there's just, even more and more powerful messages that we're not doing enough to fight racism in this country. And today we just passed the historic and tragic marker of 400,000 dead Americans from the pandemic. And the pandemic has disproportionately affected people from the BIPOC community. And so I just really wanted to urge unanimous support for this anti-racism policy. And I think that it's critical that we redouble our efforts to fight racism, especially right now. And as it, just becomes overwhelmingly clear that we, to date, as a country, have not done enough. And it would be great to see Anchorage start to be a leader in the nation on that front. And so I would encourage unanimous support of this policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up on the telephone, speaker number 8, Alex Blum. Alex, are you on the line with us tonight? Alex, if you can hear us, it's *6 to unmute. All right, we will go ahead and come back to him. The next speaker will be Mary Richards. Mary, are you on the line with us tonight?
Hello. Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mary Richards, and tonight I'm here as a member of the Alaska Black Caucus, the National Writing Project, and teacher leader of the Alaska Poetry Out Loud competition. Tomorrow, a historic moment will take place. A 22-year-old woman, a 22-year-old Black woman, Amanda Gorman, will carry forward the United States tradition of writing and reading a poem in honor of the inauguration. The title of her poem is "The Hill We Climb." Gorman's purpose will be to spread a message of unity. In an interview on Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday, she exclaimed that the power of poetry is everything. Poetry is an art form, but it's also a weapon. It's an instrument. It's the ability to make ideas that have been known felt and said. She asserts that's a real type of duty for the poet. Gorman goes on to say that one of her favorite writers, Audre Lorde, also a Black woman, has said there are no new ideas, just new ways of making them felt. And that's what I try to do. So tonight, in honor of poetry and light and the spirit of unity, I too sing America and share a poem. This one comes to America by the way of British poet Christopher Reid. Before sharing this poem, I'd like to honor and acknowledge my ancestors who came over on the Mayflower from England. I am a proud daughter of the American Revolution and a defender of our Constitution. Reid's poem is from his collection titled The Late Sun. The name of the poem is Death of a Barber. Not Mustafa, but one of his colleagues cut my hair today. That's when I learned that Mustafa had passed away, a victim of the virus. Intimate work the barber's fingers, scissors, and razors titivating the professional gentleness, crown, sides, back, and neck. Almost a caress. I'd been going for ages to that little shop he used to have, festooned with climbing plants and parakeets in cages, before I learned Mustafa's name and something of his life. But as etymology fails us, touch and tact are the same. For months now, no one had touched me except my wife, and I was looking forward to a needed trim. I got one as expert and luxurious as any of Mustafa's, but it was not from him. Superintendent Bishop and Honorable Board, please remember you wield great power and must protect students, teachers, and families. ASD's current guidance of 3 to 6 feet in classrooms is unacceptable and leaves our most economically diverse schools and most equitably challenged students most at risk of contracting COVID-19. Thank you for advancing forward the proposed anti-racism and instructional equity policy. Let's look forward to that new poem tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up in the queue, speaker on the telephone, Marge Stoneking. Marge, are you on the line with us tonight?
Hi, this is Marge Stoneking. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm a mother of 2 alumni of the Anchorage School District and a member of the Alaska Black Caucus Allies for Change group. And I'm here in support of the anti-racism and instructional equity policy brought forward by members Bellamy and Mitchell. Thank you so much. To me, this is foundational. It is, to echo Celeste Hodge Groudon's comments earlier, somewhat shocking that it hasn't existed previously. We need to go beyond non-discrimination. We need to do better than that. I am one with the school district in being proud of the rich diversity of cultures and languages in our district. And I've often bragged of that to my friends in other communities outside Alaska. At the same time, I am a member of the white privileged community, and I saw that throughout our journey through the school district. And I think that this policy will give the beginnings of being able to address that equity. Perhaps it's natural that white teachers have a bias towards white students. Just a thought, not a science statement, but just a thought. And I understand, having heard the previous presentation from the superintendent just now, that race and ethnicity is looked at in a number of different metrics. I think that the annual equity report, bringing all of those pieces together, might paint a better picture and be able to show where the gaps are, to show the problem, because we know that we need to see the problem, to recognize the problem, to be able to address the problem. So instructional equity, that can mean a lot of things, and hopefully it will mean a lot of things going forward. But perhaps it starts with looking at that compiled data and looking at that picture and recognizing that, yes, we have racism, we have structural racism, institutional racism in the Anchorage School District, and we can do better. Let's humble ourselves and take that first step. I encourage your support and putting this forward and passing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to go back up to a previous speaker, Alex Blum. Alex, are you able to join us tonight?
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Superintendent Bishop and school board members. I really appreciate all the work you're doing to support and improve the educations of Anchorage students. My name is Alex Blum. I'm an Anchorage resident, and I'm here to express my support for the proposed anti-racism and instructional equity policy submitted by members Bellamy and Mitchell, because it will help us confront and solve an urgent and important problem. Historically and currently, Anchorage schools have marginalized and discriminated against students of color, particularly Black and Alaska Native students. Our schools just haven't been designed to serve them, which means that in many ways they've been designed to fail them. That's why Anchorage schools successfully graduate only 63% of Alaska Native students and 81% of Black students, compared to almost 90% of white students. The good news is that this policy is a tremendous opportunity to address that inequity. And by fixing the problems facing some members of the ASD community, the entire community will benefit. As the writer Jenny Liddell has put it, pain comes not from one part of the body, but from systemic imbalance. You have an opportunity with this policy and with all the work that will follow it to help restore that balance, and I urge you to do so. This initiative is good for everybody. It's going to raise the achievement of all students and improve the entire school district. And that's what the abstract and about the future, but to speaking personally, I'm white, and every time I've been part of an institution that dedicated itself to creating an inclusive environment and trying to achieve equity in its results, I have benefited, my peers have benefited, and so does the institution as a whole. Please don't miss this opportunity. Please support and implement this policy. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Next up in the queue on the telephone, Shelley Krajicek. Shelley, are you on the line tonight?
Yes, hello.
Hi, thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Shelley Krajicek, and I am actually an executive officer with the National Education Association who is asked to listen in by the educators of Anchorage. And I would like to begin by applauding your initial efforts to start really thinking really proactively about ways that you can work to fight the systemic racism that exists not just within Anchorage schools, but within all of the schools in our country. So I applaud your initial efforts, and I wish to echo many of the other thoughts that have been shared by some of the speakers. I do wish to share with you that the bulk of my job over the past 6 years has been working with school districts and chief state school officers to help them deal with the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act. As you know, equity audits are actually a required component of meeting the federal law. And that is just one step that's included within this, and one of the misperceptions I've seen with members of the Anchorage community. Not understanding that we must first evaluate and understand our systems makes people think that we are blaming someone for the system. The truth of the matter is that the systems are not the fault of one person, but failure to work to correct those systems can be. I wish to share with you also that I've had the opportunity to work at length with the Commissioner of Alaska, with Dr. Michael Johnson, on the implementation of Every Student Succeeds Act, and with other work within the state, and with some of the work he's hoping to do with the Native Alaskans that live in your fabulous state. I am excited by what I see you doing. I wish to be able to have the opportunity to lift up the Anchorage School Board and the work of the Anchorage School District and say, this is a necessary first step toward advancing education, not just for our students of color, but for all of the students of this nation. Thank you for your initial efforts. I look forward to your continued work. Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker I have on the telephone, Marnie Hartill. Marnie, are you on the line with us tonight? Marnie, if you can hear us, it is *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Thank you so much. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Marnie Hartill. I'm a teacher and also serve as Vice President of Programs for Anchorage Education Association. I'm speaking as an individual in support of the school board's proposed anti-racism and instructional equity policy. It's absolutely crucial that we affect change for equity in education so that all children have the quality education they deserve, regardless of the color of their skin, the neighborhood they call home, or other factors. Unfortunately, the anti-racism and instructional equity policy has come under scrutiny in social media from, those who lack the courage to learn, or who lack the compassion to listen, or merely pull from the same playbook of ignorant revisionists who create fiction unsupported by any professional American historicist. These are further attempts to erase history, disregard generations of trauma, and continue structural and institutionalized racism. We need to teach our students media literacy, how to recognize propaganda, identify fallacies and reasoning, source check and debunk fake news, and become careful critics of the spread of misinformation in social media. The lack of these skills directly led to the insurrection witnessed January 6th, led by white supremacists and conspiracy theorists. In October of 2019, Anchorage Education Association's Human and Civil Rights Committee hosted our first public community dialogue, which brought together youth, parents, community leaders, educators, school board members to talk about issues that impact education. And the leading concern gathered from parents and community members in those discussions was that our schools could do a better job of providing culturally responsive instruction and decision-making. Our port city of Anchorage is a gateway to the world. We need to prepare our students to be compassionate, globally minded scholars who demonstrate high academic excellence. And one thing I enjoyed about the AEA Community Dialogue was the conversation and the hum of the room, the fantastic food and the fellowship. And where has that fellowship gone? We cannot allow violence, racism, hate, and ignorance to pollute the hope and futures of Anchorage students. We cannot allow infighting, social media posts, pointed emails, and dismissive comments to tear down the power of holding positive, courageous conversations. Through meaningful discussion, our children and the adults in the room can listen, grow, and discover new things, which open our hearts and broaden our minds. A friend of mine wrote to me today that our discussions must, quote, embrace the pain of the healing process. I completely agree with him. The human and civil rights movement began with "We shall overcome." We still have work to do. Now we transform. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of public testimony for everybody that was signed up. We have the section on our agenda and on board docs for any written testimony that was submitted. Encourage folks to go out and take a look at that when you see it. Next up on the agenda is the superintendent update. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President and School Board. I wanted to just begin by, I had quite a bit of time reserved for my report to share about our school start, and to all of our parents and little ones out there and our teachers who had expected to be back. The decision was difficult in the manner that I just hated to disappoint so many people, but easy to make using our protocols for safety in regard to icy roads. And so I let the experts be the experts, and we were out at 4 a.m. riding the roads, and they were just too dangerous. So tomorrow, January 20th, we look to have a great day in school. But on that note, if I wanted to share just some good things. And this one bright little girl's face says it all. One of our principals sent this in, and I just want to thank our teachers. She has the expectation of the world, and we need to deliver to this little gal here and all of our kids in school. I just wanted to share this and that. Many of our teachers just really invited their kids in and their parents to see their classrooms. If parents weren't available, they really zoomed in and allowed them to zoom around their classroom and really see the picture. This next one is a video, and just the outreach of schools and teachers in communities. This was made by Denali Montessori. And just take a look at this. Just spend a minute with me to share the kinds of communication and the creativity that was planned, really to have a good start for our kids, knowing things would be different.
We're so excited you're coming back to school. Things will be a little different for the beginning and end of our school days. School starts at 9:30 with drop-off only on 10th Street between Main and Cordova, between 9:15 and 9:30 to the playground. Do note the front door will be closed. There won't be a crossing guard until 9:15. If possible, parents are encouraged to stay in their cars. While the playground is closed until 9:15, once it's open, it will not be for playing. Upon entering, students will go to their designated class meeting spot until it's time to go in. Pickup is staggered between 2:40 and 3, and the same meeting spots will be on the playground. If you arrive late in the morning at 9:35 or after, go to the front door and ring the bell. please remember, keep social distancing, and masks are required for all students, parents, and staff. It's a different school routine, but we can make it work together as a Denali community.
All right, so that's just a little fun, and at our next board meeting, we will have, for sure, some updates about our classrooms and, just all the information that we can provide you in regard to our school start. So regrettably, we look to presenting that to you at our first meeting in February. I'd also would like to have Tom Roth as well as Jen Petronas do a health services update that I will follow up on their comments.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Through the board president, if we can go to the next slide, please. So just very quickly, I'll say a couple of words and then pass off to Ms. Petronas, the Director of Health Services. But I think the board is aware that Wednesday, the 6th January, that the district hosted a COVID-19 vaccine clinic here in the Education Center, and I think several eligible board members had the opportunity to go through that. And that went on for about 7.5 days with what I think were really pretty exceptional outcomes. So this evening, I'm going to ask Ms. Petronas to brief on a couple things. The first will be just to give a snapshot of where we stand with regards to testing in the district, and then talk a bit more about the vaccine program. So with that, I'm going to pass off to Jennifer.
Thank you. So we'll start with COVID testing. We do have the 5 capstone testing facilities that are right now on hold just due to some permitting issues, but we'll continue to work that and let everyone know once that is open. The Anchorage School-Based Health Center they're going to be opening for their testing sites later on. They're just working out a few last-minute logistical constraints, but they are in secondary and they'll be opening up soon as well. The Visit Health pop-up testing sites are open and they will continue as planned. And then we did last week get 20 Abbott ID Now machines from the state of Alaska. And right now we have 15 of them dispatched and the nurses are ready to begin that rapid PCR testing immediately. 5 more of those machines are here at the Ed Center and those nurses will be getting trained later on this week. So we're excited about that. So in the last 7.5 days, our nurses were working really hard here at the Ed Center giving out vaccinations, and they gave out over 6,000. We were only allotted 6,000 for Anchorage School District, and we borrowed an extra 200 from a regional hospital. There were no wasted doses. We made sure that every vaccine that was in each vial was used, and we had over 32 nurses involved over the course of the 7.5 days. We had a lot of fun doing it, and we can't wait to give the second vaccine in February. The next slide is just a picture of our nurses in our morning huddle. And then a picture of our nurse here at East High School getting her vaccine. Our vaccination plan is going to follow the state of Alaska's plan, and here on this slide, it outlines who is eligible and in which tier and in which phase. Right now, we are in phase 1A with all healthcare workers, some of our special education teachers, and TAs in life skills classrooms, and we're also vaccinating all 65 and older. In those 6,000 vaccinations that we gave, over half of those were 70 and older. We had a young man that was 101 that came and got his vaccination, and over 100 people that were in their 90s. So I think that is just amazing, and I'm so proud of our nurses.
And I would just like to add on to that and really share, it was a tremendous effort, and we are so happy to have fulfilled this. One thing that school districts do understand, especially large school districts like ourselves, is understanding scale. and understanding how is it that you can disperse in a fast amount of time or do a large scale project. And certainly giving vaccine, almost 1,000 a day, while registering people for the vaccine was a major task. And I want to say thank you as well. I believe that was our niche in this, is that immediately on the first day, we had, as you know, the state system had some trouble spots at the beginning, and it was really under, Jen Petronis and Tom's leadership that initially the first day they came and said, people aren't understanding and they don't have a reservation. And Jen said, I'm not going to turn an 80-year-old man away that walked to our door. So from there, I think Tom just called IT, and IT brought computers and people, and this whole place was just set up. So I just want to thank them and to reach out. Let's pick it up. But you've heard Jen say that it was just fun. It really was a fun day. And we wanted to communicate, and we continue to communicate to our state and our city that the government agencies really are not set up necessarily for scale. We do scale. Anchorage, we educate, 45,000 students. When we talked in the past with partnering with the city and busing, it was difficult. Those discussions were difficult, not because it was hard to agree or disagree on anything. It was understanding the scale, whereby the city transports about 2,000 people a day. ASD was transporting 24,000 people twice a day. We understand scale. In regard to feeding students, when we are open, we feed about 20,000 students 2 meals a day. ASD understands scale. So when it comes to the next vaccine in the clinic, we look to our state and to our own health department to turn to us for scale. We understand that school will be in session, but many of our nurses want to figure out a way to share and cohort themselves so that they can still volunteer. Tom Roth, Chief of Operations, has already investigated partnerships, not only with healthcare workers, but college professors came and were trained and joined us so that they can bring their nursing students. We actually had nursing students already participate. So we stand ready. I just appreciate the work of the team here and their expertise. No one in the state, one single entity, has dispersed over 6,000 vaccine. No one but the Anchorage School District. Thank you. Thanks. And I know that we had just discussed this in our earlier meeting, but Jim is going to whip around and share publicly in our meeting just the pre-filed legislation that he worked with the chair of the Finance Committee on, Member Marcet.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. During the Finance Committee this afternoon, I did brief the highlights of the ESSER II funding. ASD has received their allotment from the state, and it's just over $50 million, with the intent of this grant to fully reopen K-12 schools to facilitate all of those facets of education to help close the learning gaps created this year. It covers a broad range of everything we've used and will continue to use, from IT equipment through programmatic assistance and supports. And DEED did retain a small portion, a little bit under 16 million. So we do expect that there will be additional block grants coming down. I think most of you are tracking. There also was the draft president-elect ESSER III bill has been put out. At least initially in draft form, it contains about twice the ESSER II K-12 funding. So we'll see how that plays out over the next few weeks. So for the pre-filed legislation, the legislators filed on the 8th and the 18th and the 15th of this month. They just started session today. And so there's over 20 plus bills that have already been put out. I'll cover just briefly 8 of them that we're tracking that will go through several modifications, most likely through the session, and I will keep the board apprised. The first is House Bill 45. It talks about compensability for workers' compensation, the assumption that if a worker that's been designated as essential and part of a declared emergency during contagious diseases, you would presume compensability if they caught the contagious disease while on the job. That just came out. It hasn't been discussed in any committees yet, as well as the rest of them. So I'll move forward to House Bill 67. It's a return to the $20 million above the foundation formula that all the districts received a few years ago with the intent toward helping with academic recovery. Senate Bill 6, it would be a statewide retirement incentive program for employees who are retirement eligible in a defined contribution plan who are 50 or over for both PERS and TERS. Senate Bill 8 is the Alaska READS Act, very similar to what Senator Begich put out last year, and it would be a $5 million statewide 3-year grant toward multiple districts focused on early reading.
And actually, it is about reading, but it is called the pre-K. So I'm not sure that the pre-K is an acronym for reading for all kids or something like that. So the name of the bill is pre-K. It just is the Old Reading Act bill. Yeah. Right. So you are correct in your other title.
Thank you. Senate Bill 15 is a bill put out just this past week. And it's really for elected leaders, assembly members, board members, et cetera, that they could incur a $1,000 civil penalty for violating the Open Meeting Acts. I put this out really for the information for school board members. We would certainly make sure that we don't violate those within the district, but wanted to make sure you were tracking it. Senate Bill 16, both Senator Begich and Senator Gray Jackson from Anchorage would proposes an increased minimum wage to $15 an hour statewide. Senate Bill 18 is an elementary class size reduction bill, currently unfunded, but it proposes a 5-year grant for districts who can come up with a plan, work through deed, and get approval to start reducing class sizes for grades K through 8. And finally, Senate Bill 42 is really a pretty broad bill focused on early education and reading, staffing ratios, and really a big piece of it is the course credit for those students, especially high school students, who could get classes or certifications outside a normal school day and still receive course credit for those. So barring any questions.
Those, we wanted to just publicly share those again, knowing that we will be following these and there's lots of things to discuss at the state legislature, and those do include education and impact on education. I just want to close by sharing, there was a public testimony on social media this evening, and I do encourage, I shared with our team here, if you have an opportunity, seeing the movie Social Dilemma. It is a Netflix movie on social media and its impact and the use of AI or machine thinking to create reality. So very good. I encourage parents to watch it with your children if you'd like, especially your teens. It's pretty powerful. And I just want to end again with a thank you that the well-being of a community, the strength of a community is really based on its ability to take care of its young, as well as take care of its seniors or its elders. And I share that ASD, after this last week, was really involved in both of those, and I'm proud to do that. And so thank you, school board, for supporting our venture into giving the vaccines And tomorrow, with the start of school, it will also be taking care of our young. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Board members have any questions or comments for Dr. Bishop? Member Marchette, you are up.
So I just want to kind of support what Dr. Bishop said. I know no other organization in this city that can give out 1,000 vaccinations in one day. You know, I have heard that possibly vaccinations are given out so that it's equally distributed between sites. However, when you have an office that can only give out 20 to 40 vaccinations a day, and you have an organization that can do 1,000 a day, I think it's more important that we are thinking about our community and getting them vaccinated as soon as possible and doing what's best for our community and moving forward with this, with hope and moving forward so that we can move forward. So I just like to throw that out there that I'm hoping someone's listening and that they will think about this. The next comment I wanted to make was I am kind of disappointed about today too, but I understand about the roads. I've been invited to Lake Hood by the principal and assistant principal, and I'm so excited. They're both excited to have me there. I'm going to be visiting the school and seeing firsthand our students coming in, and then I'm also going to be visiting Creekside Park, which I've been invited to both of these schools. And as I said before, I walk the talk and talk the talk, and if I'm asking teachers to come back, I'm going to be there. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Member Mitchell.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One that I was planning to ask, and I'm not exactly sure what the status is based on Ms. Petronus's presentation, but I know that, or I'm fairly certain that we were offering testing for any teachers or students who were planning to come back to school. And I'm wondering if we were able to do that, and if so, how many took advantage of that, availed themselves of that opportunity. And then I also had a question about the number of elementary students who are coming back. Do you want me to ask that one now as well, or should I follow up with that?
Well, let's give Jen Petronus a chance to answer the first question, and then we'll follow back around for your second one.
Through the board president to Member Mitchell, we did encourage staff and students to get tested last week prior to returning today. However, we encouraged them to go to the Muni established public testing sites, and we did not receive those results, and we're not privy to that information unless they share it with us.
Okay. But it sounds like we're going to have our own testing facilities up and running, because I know, based on universities that have been very successful with their keeping COVID rates down, the key is really, weekly testing. And
actually, Member Mitchell, our testing is going to be for symptomatic only, and the surveillance testing is the city. So the city has those two sites for surveillance testing. ASD is taking place in symptomatic testing.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was in the Board Connect, if I've read it properly, it sounds, or if I interpreted the data accurately, it sounds like out of all of our schools, roughly 44% of our elementary students have opted to come back to in-person. Is that percentage correct?
Through the president to Member Mitchell, not exactly. 44% would be the total amount that we would be expecting to come back, but there would be some who, of course, we're not expecting to come. It's not, so it's 44% of our student bodies will be back in the school. So 8,000 students at the elementary are those would be the rough number that we're expecting. What's really difficult is that we've got families that are still kind of waiting and see. We're seeing the ASD virtual numbers bump up by the hundreds in the last few days as people think it through. So it's hard to come up with an exact, even an estimate of exactly how many are going to physically show up. our hope, of course, without the inclement weather, was to actually have you a head count today with an actual number that we could look at and that would be real bodies. But at their next board meeting, of course, in our Board Connect, we'll put that out for this week so you can see the actual number.
Okay, so it sounds like we don't really know yet. But my follow-up to that is then for the 44%, or for the students who come back, the ones who are not coming back, they're all going to have to go to Calvert. Is that correct? Because there won't be the Zoom option anymore.
And remember, Mitchell, the 44% is a pre-K 2.
Right. No. I understand that. Of the students we anticipate, of the students we are offering in-person school to at this point. Well, I guess it doesn't include the South. Yeah. So at the other ones, assuming if that percentage that we're estimating at this point or anticipating the 44%, then the 56%, the option for those students is to do the Calvert ASD virtual. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, because some of the 56% are 3 through 6th grade students who are still on e-learning. Of the students in pre-K 2, we had about 300 move over to online learning through ASD virtual. So the
44%
of all other students, because 56% who are not going also include 3 through 6 who are in Zoom learning with their teachers now.
Okay, so I misinterpreted that number. So the 44%, let's say there are, just for round numbers, this is obviously not correct, but let's say we had 10,000 pre-K through 6th grade students. Then you're saying we're anticipating that 4,400 of them will be in schools in K through 2. And then the 5,600 is either 3rd through 6th graders or the K through 2nd graders who aren't going to in-person. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we don't know what percentage of kindergarten through 2nd graders we're expecting out of just that population. We don't know what percentage we're expecting to come back to live in-person classes at this point. We'll figure that out when they show up tomorrow.
We have an estimate and we're planning for them, but until they show up, it's really hard to suspect. But it's about 70 to 80% of the students. In some schools, we shared those data with you early on. In some schools, it's upwards of 70, 80%, some it's 60, but it is a pretty high percentage of when we did our survey of pre-K through 2nd grade, really of all elementary.
Thank you.
Next up in the queue, Board Member Bellamy.
I think my question has been answered. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Member Marset.
So I debated on whether to comment on this, but I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to do it. We received a letter from AEA, and it's out there, everybody's seen it, so it's public knowledge, about the school board working with them to make sure schools are safe. And you know, I know people send us different articles, but I just read from the director of CDC nationally that said school districts, schools are not spreading. I mean, they're just like a non-event. They're not spreading the virus. And I have to say, when I look at this in perspective, I had someone send me a message, and I think they put it very well. And they said, kudos to all the childcare workers. Wow, what a bunch of brave 19 to 25-year-olds working away for $10 an hour, risking their lives to take care of your kids. Well, that's exactly how I feel about our teachers. There is, and again, I know there's fear out there, but we have a job to do. And that job, and our first responsibility, is to our kids and the mission and vision of this school district. And I would hope that those that are considering maybe not coming to work tomorrow, well, we'll rethink that, because this is about the kids. And I understand the fears, but man, when I read this comment about childcare workers who have been out there all this time taking care of kids and I haven't heard anything from them. I just want to put it in perspective. So I hope our teachers will think about that when school starts tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, not seeing any other hands up in the queue or anybody frantically waving, we will go ahead and move on in our agenda. It'll be the consent agenda is up next. And Member Bellamy, if you could kick off the consent agenda.
I can, thank you. I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of ASD memorandum number 072, which is the personnel report, and the regular session minutes for November 16th, 2020.
Are there any comments on either of those consent agenda items by board members? I missed it. Who was the second on that one? Was that
Andy?
Andy, that's what that's what Katie thought. All right, seeing no comments or questions, Katie, if you could please do a roll call vote.
Member Mitchell. Member Marset.
Yes.
Member Holloman.
Yes.
Member Hildy.
Yes.
Member Donnelly.
Yes.
Vice President Bellamy.
Yes.
President Michaelis.
Yes.
Madam President,
Yes, Member Donnelly.
thank you. I just want to make a point of personal privilege. My hand raising function is still not working.
Okay, we were wondering that earlier. We'll keep an eye out for you and listen. And I believe the consent agenda passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next up are our action items. I'm going to read just a quick statement. The procedures for agenda item testimony are as follows. An action item memo is first introduced by the Vice President, and if seconded by another board member, I will open the floor for public testimony. If you've signed up in advance, you will be called on in the order in which you were signed up. You will have 3 minutes to testify. When 30 seconds remain, a chime will ring to inform you so that you can finish your sentence. After all testimony closes, I will open the floor for board discussion before finally calling for the official vote. The voting results will be displayed on the screen. And I do have one person, but it is on item number 5. So Vice President Bellamy, if you could kick us off with ASD Memorandum 070.
I move to approve ASD memorandum number 070 and authorize the award of contract for providing district-wide duct cleaning services at various Anchorage school district locations on an as-required basis for a 3-year contract in the amount not to exceed $383,400 with 2 1-year option periods in the amount not to exceed $255,800 for a total contract value not to exceed $639,200 to J&K Power Vac.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a first and a second. Are there any board members with questions or comments on ASD Memorandum 070? Oh, Member Marset.
So I did have a question about this. When we do duct cleaning, is that like during the summer when students aren't in school? I'm just not sure what the process is for that.
Through the board president to Member Marset, I'm going to have to come back to you with a more definitive answer. There is no specific timeline, although I would offer that probably the majority of the work does occur when staff and students are not in the buildings. But if there's a need, this contract is available for us to bring this contractor in to take immediate action if necessary. But I'd be happy to have Mr. Hargraves follow up and give you a more definitive response to your question.
Yeah, just to follow, I just didn't know, like, I don't know what it involves to do duct cleaning, so I don't know if it's like particles fly through the air or, you know, I don't know. So I guess I'm just asking. So I appreciate your follow-up. Thank you.
Any other board members with questions or comments? Seeing none, Katie, if you could please do a roll call vote.
Member Hildy?
Yes.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
Vice President Bellamy?
Yes.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Member Mitchell?
Yes.
Member Marset?
Yes.
President Michaelis?
Yes. ASD memorandum number 070 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next up.
I move to approve ASD memorandum number 074 and authorize the superintendent to redirect $5.3 million from the 2015 through 2018 bond project balances to earthquake recovery capital projects.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Do any board members have any questions or comments on ASD memorandum 074? Member Don, I do see your hand.
Okay.
Was I recognized, Madam President?
Yes, you were.
Thank you. I just want to thank the administration for proposing that these funds go towards the earthquake projects. I think those have to be our highest priorities. We need to make sure our schools are seismically safe and repaired from the damage that was done. And so I was pleased to see that that was the emphasis that was placed on utilizing these funds as they became available.
Thank you. Any other board members with comments or questions? Seeing none, Katie, if you could please do a roll call vote.
Member Hildy?
Yes.
Member Mitchell?
Yes.
Member Marset?
Yes.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Vice President Bellamy?
Yes.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
President Michaelis?
Yes. ASD memorandum 074 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next up.
Next item, I move to approve ASD memorandum number 073 and authorize the allocation of up to $200,000 from the 2019C unallocated capital project interest earnings. Capital project interest earning funds to apply to the Orion Elementary School roof replacement project.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Do any board members have any questions on ASD memorandum 073? Seeing none, Katie, if you could please do a roll call vote.
Vice President Bellamy?
Yes.
Member Mitchell?
Yes.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Member Hildy?
Yes.
Member Marset?
Yes.
Member Holloman? Do you see him? Member Holloman? I don't see your videos if you're giving oops. Oh.
Very good.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And President Michaelis?
Yes. And ASD memorandum 073 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item.
Next item, I move to approve ASD memorandum number 080 and adopt the tentative agreement between the district and the Anchorage Principals Association, also known as APA, which will establish terms and conditions of employment for individuals in this unit during the period between July 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2023.
Second.
I'm sorry, one more time on the second, I couldn't hear.
Dina Mitchell seconded.
Thank you. All right, I have a first and a second. I have one person who has signed up to speak on this ASD memorandum. It is Patrick Freeman. And sir, are you on the line with us tonight? And if you can hear us, it'll be *6 to unmute. I know I see his name there, but I don't see him coming off mute. And he's my only speaker, so ordinarily I would. Patrick, if you can hear us, it's *6 to unmute. Okay. I was there to give him an opportunity. I don't quite know what to do. Okay. Patrick, the other thing you can try is if you can hear us but can't get unmuted, if you want to hang up and call right back in, we'd love to hear from you. Might be a little bit backwards, but I guess in the interest of time, since I haven't been able to connect with him, are there any, I see he did hang up, so maybe he'll call right back. Were there any board members that had any comments or questions on the APA contract? Member Marcette?
I just want a huge shout out to our staff and to APA for coming together on this contract. I know it's been difficult, and there's been a lot of going back and forth, but I am truly appreciative of everyone that has put this contract into motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Still waiting to see if Patrick calls in. Were there any other board comments or questions? Dr. Bishop?
I know that our team has recommended the board approve it, and I just want to put an exclamation point on that. And I am really happy about this. And hopefully, in my stalling time, Patrick is on board.
Okay, good.
Hi.
Hi,
I'm
Patrick.
here.
We can hear you. Thank you for calling back in.
I'm sorry about that. I wanted to say good evening, Anchorage School Board. I'm Patrick Freeman, proud principal of Willard Bowman Elementary and president of the Anchorage Principals Association. Tonight, Dr. Bishop spoke about the importance of grades and student learning to board members. In the next couple of months, your Anchorage principals will lead all ASD schools back to in-person school during challenging but improving community health times. The principal position is a very difficult one and it has increased in stress and demand since the pandemic and racially tensions times. Many who have not been in a school leadership position do not understand this demand. To describe what principals did before the pandemic and these tense times, what we do now today is unfathomable to many. Despite these increasing challenges, Anchorage principals have been resilient in expressing opinions and following through with the direction of the school board and ASD leadership. I recommend the Anchorage School Board to approve and adopt the ASD APA negotiated agreement. This contract will allow Anchorage principals to move forward and focus on the goal of educating our students during a time of the increasing importance of reestablishing our great public schools in Anchorage. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had member Hildy's hand up in the queue.
I just wanted to share my excitement for this. I know so much hard work was gone into getting to this day, and I'm just very proud of everybody who worked. And just to recognize, being a principal is hard in normal years. This year has just been, and I know Mr. Freeman mentioned it, just unbelievable. The challenge, the leadership required to lead a school, parents, everybody with a different view, everybody, really suffering too, like people, teachers, staff, everybody's going through hard challenges, and they're leading everybody through that as well, on top of working toward academic gains and now re-entry. So I'm just incredibly thankful, and thanks.
All right, not seeing any other hands up in the queue. Katie, if we could please do a roll call vote.
Member Mitchell?
Yes.
Member Marcette?
Emphatically, yes.
Member Holloman?
Yes.
Member Hildy?
Yes.
Member Donnelly?
Yes.
Vice President Bellamy?
Yes.
President Michaelis.
Yes. Pleased to announce that ASD Memorandum 080 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. That concludes our action items. Next up on the agenda are non-action items. There are 2 items there. Are there any that board members wish to pull for discussion today? All right, not seeing any hands waving or hands up in the queue. Here we go. Next up is new business. I've got a couple of things on my list. I know a couple of board members have a couple of things they want to talk about as well. The first thing I'm going to do is read one letter. However, I received it twice from 2 different bargaining units. So for the sake of time, I'm reading the same letter once. Dear Andrew, who is our Senior Director of Labor Relations, pursuant to the terms of our current collective bargaining agreement, kindly accept this as sufficient notification of Teamsters Local Union 959's desire to open the collective bargaining agreement for the purpose of review and or amending all articles, appendixes, supplements, addenda, and or letters of understanding of such agreement. Teamsters Local Union number 959 will be negotiating a collective bargaining agreement with your company that may affect area and industrial standards as well as other Teamster members. The Public Services Division, affiliated with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and Joint Council of Teamsters number 28, have a constitutional responsibility to assure that their affiliates preserve and protect area and industry standards and not take any action that adversely affects the interests of any Teamster members. Consequently, any proposed collective bargaining agreement with your company must be reviewed and approved by Joint Council of Teamsters number 28 and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Trade Division prior to being submitted to affected members for ratification. This approval process shall not delay reaching an appropriate agreement. Please contact Business Representative Derek to schedule a date and time your representative will be available to meet. Sincerely, Teamsters Local 959, Gary Dixon. We received this on behalf of the Anchorage School District Food Service Group and our transportation, bus drivers and attendants as well, same letter. So they are in compliance with board policy 4143 for negotiations, and just wanted to get that on the record on their behalf and look forward to our team getting in touch with them. Next up, so I've been working wrapping my head around board policy 9320, which talks about meetings and attendance and all of the parts that go with it and how we have our attendance reflected on our website. And so for board members' reference, like I say, it's board policy 9320. And one of the things it says is board members must physically attend 75% of the regular board meetings over a 24-month period. There have been a lot of times where the boardroom has been closed by mandate from, I guess, municipal, the mayor. And so trying to figure out how it all works, but I'm going to, I've worked with Katie and she's worked with IT to put together a different look at our attendance. So we'll have our overall attendance, as the board policy says that if board members get prior advance notice from the board president that their telephonic participation will count as a remote attendance. But we still have the policy that talks about the 75% physical attendance. So there's a little bit of conflict in there. So what I'm proposing is we have an overall attendance rate that is listed and a physically present attendance rate that is there. And it does have the same legend that talks about were we here, were we remote because we had to be, stuff like that. And so wanted to let board members know that that is going to go up and going to go out and change to have it be to match and align with our board policy that is out there. But just wanted to give board members a heads up on that. Also wanted to give board members, we've talked about it kind of part and parcel through a couple of meetings earlier today. January 30th, we'll do our winter retreat. It will be from 10 to 4. And the things we're gonna do is a deep dive into the legislative bills that have been filed, get more information from finance, from some folks down in Juneau to help, just show us where things are. We're going to do the superintendent mini evaluation. So watch your email because we'll send that out ahead of time and go through that. And then we'll also do our board self-evaluation with AJ from the Council of Great City Schools, starting at about 2. So we're looking at about the window of 10 to 4. Just want to make sure that everybody's calendar is on the ready for that. I have 2 folks that have reached out to talk about possible new business. The first one is Mr. Donley. He sent out a resolution to board members earlier today. Wanted to give him the opportunity to talk about it and as a board figure out where it goes from here.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I speak to that, I'd like to speak to something that was raised at a recent assembly meeting, and that is the municipal voters guide for the upcoming election. I don't know if you all remember what happened in the election this last year, but the voters guide was pathetic, to say the best for it. There was almost zero, in fact, I think there was zero information about candidates in it. And I think one of the greatest things state government has going is the state voters guide, where all the candidates have statements in there and photographs and positions, and that helps level the playing field in a democracy and in a republic such as ours. It allows non-incumbents actually fair, equal access, at least for that one moment in time, to the voters. And I remember growing up, seeing that voters guide on the kitchen table of my parents and them studying it before every election. That's become an Alaska tradition, and I think it's just a shame. And there was a lot of comment about this at the assembly meeting, that the city of Anchorage doesn't use a similar system for our voters guide. And I'm wanting to put forward an issue before the communications committee to actually take a position on what should be in the Anchorage voters guide, and I would advocate that there be more information about candidates. I think this is especially important with school board seats. We all know school board seats, you run. I think the vast majority of our citizens are not aware that our school board seats are not by district. They're the entire city of Anchorage. And to try to finance a campaign like that is incredibly difficult. It's like running for mayor. It's the same parallel as running for mayor. And so anything we can do to level the playing field for all the candidates, I think would just be really good for our city and for the electoral process. So I would hope that we could get together and talk about advocating something in access to the voters guide that would actually allow voters that kind of information about candidates. So I'd like to just put that forth as an issue to be dealt with in the communications committee, and maybe go on the agenda there.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to do, that's one topic, trying to get the will of the board. Would the board like to see participation somehow in, candidate profiles with the city or something like that, go to the communications committee as, something to discuss? Member Hildy?
I'd be open to I'm not on the communications committee, but I think it would be a good one to discuss if there's a way to make it more better access for voters. But that also seems a little weird if I'm running for office saying that. So maybe I shouldn't say that. That sounds creepy now. So I won't have an opinion. I'll take that back.
Member Marset?
We have training for school board candidates if they'd like to attend. I just have a tough time when we're returning to school. We've got an anti-racist policy. We have so many other things going on. I don't feel this is the time to take out of our schedule of representing and advocating for students to take on this type of project. So I would not be in favor of it.
Member Bellamy?
Thank you. I think in keeping with our practice, board members can bring things forward. We discuss them, and if it makes it out of committee, then that's what we go with. So I'm not sure I even understand the issue as it's presented tonight. Although I am for giving people more information. How that might be done and what our resources are, that's a discussion, I think, for the committee. Thank you.
Member Bellamy, as chair of the communications committee, is this a topic that you would be willing to put on your next agenda to just have a discussion, see where it goes?
It is a topic that I'd like to research further and discuss, yes.
All right, then I will hand that off to you. Member Donnelly, did you have one more thing you wanted to discuss?
Thank you, Madam President. Originally on the agenda tonight was going to be a resolution that I had prepared. The subject matter is that on December 18th of last year, the United States Justice Department filed a felony criminal complaint against a Zoom employee for working with the Chinese Communist government to use Zoom to censor multiple public meetings in the United States of America, where criticism of the Chinese communists was expressed in those meetings. Obviously, we're heavily reliant on Zoom here.
Dave, are you there?
I thought it was just me.
All of us. And Member Bellamy, you have your hand up, but I didn't know if it was on this topic or the last one. Oh, thank you.
Last one, sorry. Dave, we can't hear you.
I think Dave's frozen. Yeah, Dave, try turning off your video if you can hear us. I see that your audio is still on, but. All right, so he's going to figure that out. So let's just pause for a minute on that conversation, and we'll go to Member Marcette, who wanted to bring up a topic.
I'm not sure if this is committee or if it's request for information or just exactly where to put this yet. But I've been reading page by page our student handbooks. And given some of the policy changes that we're going to be making, I think those are going to have to be revisited anyway. One of my concerns is, as I'm reading, I don't see anything in there. You know, we talk about giving appeal process. And I know through my own experience, but it's been a while, so I just want to ask this question, is when a student is suspended, and what I was told was that, you know, the handbook has the appeal process. I'm wondering, do we give, I know in IEP meetings, we get a policy. But I'm wondering, do we give anything to parents, given that a lot of our parents are not English speakers, guidelines or information on how to file an appeal? So I think that's something that's missing from our handbook too. So I think, you know, we also have in there that tardies, we can suspend for tardies, out of school suspension. So what I'd like to recommend, and I know that we're not in charge of ARs, but I would like to recommend at some point that the handbooks, a committee be brought together to review the handbooks and update them with changes I feel are necessary. I didn't hear that.
Through the board president to Member Marcette, the handbooks are reviewed every year at the end of the year, and we will bring up the suggested changes from the board about the kinds of things we'd like to see in accordance with policy.
Okay,
so we can do that. And bless you. And I'll get the protocol that you talked about in regard to suspensions to you. We'll respond to that as well at each level.
Thank you.
All right, so that was all that I had for new business. Member Bellamy.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind or at least ask the superintendent whenever it's convenient and not you know, interfere with reentry. If we could get feedback from our principals on how they are doing the restorative justice practices. Because I know of some wonderful things that are going on, but I don't know all of them. And so I don't need to know all. I just want to have a representative sample of what principals are doing by each level. Thank you.
Member Hildy?
Just for, in response to Member Bellany, we do have that in governance right now, kind of work. So I think it'll be incorporated into that, whether there should be a policy or should not. I think that's planned in that discipline review. We had mentioned restorative justice at the last governance committee meeting, so we'll consider it when we talk about that. We can look at that.
And thank you for that clarification. Although what I'm looking for is what we are doing now, where the policy is a little bit different in my mind, but our actual practice right now is what my comment was relative to. Thank you.
And Madam President, I would just request it gets put on a request for information. We are literally all hands on deck in getting schools started, working with the testing as well as the vaccine in the near future, but would happy at the similar time that it's discussed to be able to share. Generally, I think secondary especially likes to share their practices with the board and what they're doing. We've had some principals come and share as well, but I think the impact and the focus right now, if we could keep it and then put that on the RFI for future.
Thank you. We'll do that. Member Marset?
So I guess I would say too, if you go out there and look at the statistics for suspensions, I mean, of course we haven't been in school, so there's really nothing to compare it to except for, last year and then compared to year before that, but we really don't know how that's going to progress in the following year. So, I've been a real advocate for looking at that, and I do follow it very closely. But I agree with you. It's going to be very hard to look at what we're doing now because we're definitely not doing what we would normally do. So.
All right. So we have Dave on Katie's phone, and we're going to try and do this on speaker to the event that it works. And Dave, can you hear us?
Hello, Katie.
Yep, we've got you on speakerphone. We're gonna see if we can make this work.
President Michaelis?
Yes, go ahead.
We can hear you, Dave. And I've got your on speakerphone up to the microphone, so go ahead.
Well, my internet has totally gone down here in a very inopportune moment. I have no internet connection whatsoever. I was about to say that an employee of Zoom had, on December 18th, been charged by the United States Department of Justice with using Zoom to interfere with position, decrying that, and taking a strong position that we are concerned with the interference by Chinese employees of Zoom in China, especially, interfering with United States public meetings, and that it should not be allowed to happen. I think it's kind of puzzling to me that I was disconnected from the internet at the exact moment I was bringing that request up. But be that as it may, that's what I'm going to recommend, that we proceed with the resolution that I had drafted that was on the original agenda for this evening. But I was subsequently told to utilize this process to have it referred to the Communications Committee.
All right. Do you have, as I mentioned before, Member Donnelly had sent out this resolution to the board earlier today or through Katie, and want to find out the will of the board for forwarding this on to the Communications Committee. If any board members have comments, as well as Member Bellamy as Communications Chair. And Member Marset, you have your hand up.
So my concern is one of the things Mr. Donnelly is asking for is that we no longer use Zoom. We use that for many things. I guess I would recommend Mr. Donnelly, if you're uncomfortable with Zoom, maybe you could join us at our school board meetings in person. But I do not think it is, not that I don't disagree with your saying, Mr. Donnelly, but I just don't think this is the thing we need to want and need to spend time on. It doesn't support our mission or our vision for our students.
Member Holloman, you have your hand raised.
I was just going to advise Mr. Donnelly not to say anything bad about the phone company while he's on the phone line. We may never hear from him again. I would support this going to the committee for review.
Member Bellamy, did you have any thoughts now that you have a first and a second for a discussion?
No.
Michaela,
I have no
it's really hard for me to hear what you're saying. I apologize, but I'm glad you can hear me. It's hard for me to hear you. I would just like this matter to be taken up in the Communications Committee in a timely manner, since it happened on December 18th that this really heinous act by the Communist Chinese was exposed by our U.S. Department of Justice.
Madam President?
Yes, go ahead, Member Bellamy.
I really don't know what to say about this. Although I don't see how, I don't sense that the Anchorage School District is at risk or threat. Lots of things go on in our country that are alarming, but we don't have to take them up at a local level. I would want to hear more from our technology people as to how they assess the threat. And I would like to, so if taking it to committee would give that insight. But I don't really know what to say about this. I mean, it's to me, I just can't, I'm just having an issue wrapping my brain around why this would be important for us right now and what the urgency would be. Thank you.
Dr. Bishop, did you have some information?
Yes, Madam President. I would like if our Chief Information Officer could make a comment about that. He knows quite a bit.
Through the board, President, to Dr. Bishop and the board. This is something that we did look into at the time. There was an individual at Zoom that did commit what they believe committed some crimes around this. They immediately fired that person at Zoom, and they have been cooperating with the DOJ on the investigation around this. But this is really no different than any other technology company that does business with China. They have to agree to the Chinese laws to do business in China. So for instance, not only is Zoom in that boat, but Microsoft, Apple, LinkedIn, TikTok, Airbnb, hundreds of other companies have to follow the rules of the Chinese government to actually operate in China. And so right now we do not route any traffic through China at all. And so I have no concerns on that front from a data security standpoint with Zoom and any of our data routing through China.
Thank you. And Board Member Hildy, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, and I'll just review the procedure because sometimes we get a little confused. If anybody can put anything on our board agenda, if you have a second, you just get it to the president. And if it's not on time for the next meeting, then it can just go on for the one after. Certainly there'd be plenty of time for that. So it only takes 2 people to get anything you want to talk about on this agenda for our big meetings. If it stays on the agenda, that means 4 people are okay with it, right? Because it only takes 4 people to take it off the agenda when we approve our agenda. So what can happen is during that discussion point, we could say, oh, let's refer it to committee. We've done that before if we don't want to take it up for a vote at that point, because it's a motion somebody's put on. But otherwise, we just bring things to committee chairs. So people, usually twice a year, I'll ask you, what do you guys want to talk about for governance this year? Or we go through our, 6,000 series. And then what we do on governance, and you can do it in any committee, is say, well, here's this one policy, and do you guys want to talk about this? And I asked the committee members, do you want to talk about that? And it can be on anything, because certainly it's the board's choice what we talk about, but it goes through, the chair only makes the agenda, and then the committee decides if that's what they want to work on. So in this case, it sounds like maybe there is support in the communications committee, and that would be something they can discuss. But you would just contact the committee chair.
All right, Margot, did you catch all that?
I caught it.
Should I have Member Donnelly reach out to you?
Sure, it's fine. I mean, the next committee meeting, I'm not calling a meeting earlier than 2/9. So it will be at that meeting, February 9th, that this and his other item would be on the agenda. Thank you.
All right, we will let him know.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Who are the two? Oh, I see. Was it Donnelly and Andy?
Oh, who's on?
Who were the two people?
I think that's, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any new business they want to bring up out of the blue? All right, I'm seeing a bunch of shaking heads. No, I do not have any additional public testimony. And so next up on the agenda is school board and administration comments. Are there any school board members that have any last comments they would like to make, or administration comments that they would like to make? Member Holloman.
Several other people remarked on this. I have to as well. But I was over at the district office doing a little bit of work on the same day that I had an appointment to get a shot. And as several people said, it was run really smoothly, really efficiently, but also the energy level inside the building was really great. And as a couple of people said, like we finally feel like we're doing something. We're really doing something that, one of the biggest concerns to us has been the amount of COVID in our community. This is an opportunity to actually help knock that down, which will make every single thing we do safer. And I really applaud the administration for taking the steps to ramp this up, as well as everybody that staffed it was just really alert, really focused on the people that were coming through. And of course, there's a lot of concern about people having reactions and being prepared to deal with medical emergencies. It's not simply just getting a stick in the arm. People had to be watched. They were walked through to get their next certificate. As a lot of you know, I spend a certain amount of time on social media, and I spend a certain amount of that time talking to people that don't usually have very nice things to say about the Anchorage School District. Everything I have seen has been positive. Everybody that came into contact with it was just really impressed with how it was carried off. And that has long-term benefits for us. So to Jen, Head of Health Services, to the Superintendent, and to Tom Roth, you guys were key people that I saw out there, but also all the staff participating, whether they were just forming people on the lines, working a desk, everybody, I think, really made the community feel welcome. You just don't expect people to be that happy about getting stuck in the arm and sent on their way again. But the feedback from the community has just been positive, and you all made us look really good that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up in the queue is our student rep, Emily, who, before you speak, I just want to say I am so very sorry, because this is the first time we have seen you in just a while, and we didn't call for any of her votes tonight. So I'm so sorry about that. We will make sure that I have a big post-it note for all the future meetings going forward, because that's why we want you here, so we can hear from you. And so please speak, share.
No problem. It's all good. I just wanted to say that obviously Student Advisory Board was really thrown by the pandemic and everything. And so we weren't able to give you guys a student voice for the first semester. But on behalf of the students, I think that everything is going as well as it possibly can given the circumstances. And we're really grateful for all of the hard work that our leaders are doing so that hopefully we can get back in the building safely and as soon as we can. Personally, I'm really looking forward to getting back in the building and really thankful for all that you guys have been doing because it's crazy times and I'm in awe because there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes that I don't think that lots of students realize, but we're all very grateful for. And so I want you guys to know that on behalf of the students, we're very thankful. You guys don't hear from us all that often, and I'm here to try and make sure that you do. And yeah, thank you.
Dr. Bishop?
Yes, thank you, Madam President, to the board, and thank you, Emily. That was a kind thing to say. I wanted to also say that Mother Nature permitting, we will start school tomorrow, and I look forward to that day. So thank you all that have planned and put their best efforts towards tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised in the queue. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All right.